How's it going, everybody? Schuyler Callihan here with Christopher Hall. It's another episode of Between the Ears, and it's Tournament Talk Edition, March Madness. It's officially here. West Virginia back in the big dance for the first time since 2021. They clearly missed out last year. Not a good season, but they bounced back, digged themselves out of a big hole, starting conference play 0-5. They get the 9 seed in the South region. They'll take on number 8 Maryland on Thursday at 12:15. So let's just get right into it. The nuts and bolts of this thing. So I guess Chris, just the initial reaction of the matchup and the seeding. I mean, it was pretty much what we thought, right? I mean, it didn't seem like there was any other scenario where they would not be in this 8 or 9 game, right? I mean, it felt like that was pretty much locked in going into this thing.
Yeah, you just wish you got a better matchup. We kind of talked about, hey, if they get out of the Big 12, they won't have that rock fight every night. Well, welcome Maryland. They just set the program record for the fewest points per game on a season. So Kevin Willard in his first season has done a terrific job defensively with this group. They're not going to overwhelm you offensively, but if they can keep Stevenson simmered down and Trey Mitchell off his game, then it's probably going to be a long afternoon for West Virginia. So we obviously knew it was going to go in, but wish they would have got the better draw. Yes, it's great for TV. It's a border rival, but you just get out of the Big 12, and here you are. It's going to be a fight from the jump.
Yeah, I mean, and I even think there was a few people out there that were messaging me or commenting on our articles for the 3 days leading up to Selection Sunday. Were like, "Man, I just hope we fall to a 10 seed or something." And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same situation though, because I mean, regardless, you're still getting a team that's going to be tough as a 7 seed, and then if
Yeah,
you
I mean Missouri's a 7, so that's just going to be another fist fight right there off the
exactly.
bat.
So I mean, it's tough either way. I think for me, really, it's you go back and look at what this team really should have been. And that's what Bob talked about a lot in his press conference after Selection Sunday. Like, if you go back and look at those games that they just gave away, like there's always every game, or there's always like 3 or 4 games every season where you're like, well, they just lost this one by a few points. If they won that, man, this would be a lot different. But no, they legitimately handed these games away because of the free throw shooting early in conference play, like Texas Tech. Well, it wasn't necessarily the free throw shooting, but rebounding and effort was pretty much not existent in that game. You go early back to conference play, they were like 20 of 38 from the free throw line against Kansas State. They were 8 of 16 against Oklahoma. Eric Stevenson, the whole situation at Oklahoma State, like it was one thing after another. They missed 2 free throws against Baylor. How different do you think that this tournament outlook could be if they would have just made those free throws at the end? Like, are we talking 3, 4 seeds higher?
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's always a butterfly effect. If you can get 2 and 3 at the beginning of the year instead of 0 and 5, I don't know how much higher they jump up. You may get a 6 seed, but if you kind of look at some of these 10, 11 seeds, it may not be as physical as Maryland, but if you draw a 7 seed, you get Penn State as a 10. If you watch Penn State towards the end of the season, that's not a team you want to see right now. So,
Yeah.
um, I, yeah, I think you would have had to win probably a handful of games. Maybe you get that Xavier one back when they held the lead there. Mentioned some of the ones early in the season. You probably want to get up to 5-4 seed to make it not as physical. But I think regardless, it just kind of is what it is. They weren't ever going to be that good of a team. And with all the guys coming in year one to where they could probably get a top 4 seed. So uh, just wish it wasn't Maryland first one. Really, it is really what it is because again, you throw the border rival. I'm sure obviously none of these guys were here since they last played. That was a while ago in the tournament. But the fans remember, so I'm sure they're going to hear all the hype leading up to it. So there will be that little bit of piece there for the alumni. But yeah, it's going to be a tough going offensively for them.
Yeah, and this is again not just aside from that, but like you look at the veteran presence on this team. You got Eric Stevenson, who's been in college for 15 years. You got Joe Toussaint, who's been around the block. You have Emmett Matthews, who's been around the block. Kitty Johnson's been around. Like these guys have been around, they just haven't had that postseason experience. And that's really one of the things that Coach Huggins was like so adamant on early in the year is like he felt like this was going to be a tournament team. It was going to take some time. You preached it almost every single post game show. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. So now these guys they finally get their chance. Keedy, he's been to the tournament before. It was one time 2 years ago. Didn't really play much in that. So Emmett obviously. Eric's never been to the NCAA tournament, so this is going to be a first and last kind of scenario for those guys. But here's what Bob Huggins had to say following the Selection Sunday reveal and the matchup against Maryland.
I mean, I think obviously they're excited to play. I mean, they weren't jumping up and down, but they were excited to play. I never had any doubt that we wouldn't play in the tournament. I thought we were getting better and better, and obviously we wanted to win more games. But I think we just had some things happen. We missed some free throws early on. Like I said, we had some other games, Oklahoma State game, make four field goals at the end of the game, and then do a stupid thing at the end of the game. K-State game, we're up, I don't know, what, 16 or something like that, 16 or 18 or something like that at halftime. The Texas Tech game, we rolled the ball out of bounds for some reason.
Right.
I think if you look back, I mean, certainly we are a team capable of winning another 5 or 6 games. And if we do that and take care of that business, or even if we just do half of them, look where we are.
All right, so here is the bracket, the region for West Virginia. We're going to dive into this thing on our bracket prediction show. We're not going to get into our picks today or anything, but just looking at the South region, obviously Alabama would be the team that West Virginia would more than likely face in the second round if they were to win their first round matchup against Maryland. There's a lot of good talented teams in this region. Missouri as a 7 seed is a very good 7 seed. Arizona has played really, really well, and I think they just kind of get overlooked for being a Pac-12 team that no one gets to watch. San Diego State and Charleston, I think that's a really, really underrated matchup. And obviously Baylor's in there. So, I mean, it's no slouch of a region. Chris, just your first thoughts on the region. Before, I know we haven't really got much into it yet, but just is there anything that stands out? Any teams that would worry you if West Virginia were to somehow get past the Sweet or get past Alabama and into the Sweet 16?
Literally every single one of those teams right there.
Except for Princeton, right?
I just think if Princeton makes it that far, I think you'd have to worry about it.
Yeah, that is true. That'd be what, an Elite Eight matchup. So,
you look at Furman, I was looking at that matchup when it first came out. I mean, that's a underrated matchup right there. Virginia's not great offensively,
might be an
obviously a
upset.
good defensive team. So, if Furman makes it that far, I think you'd have to be worried. So, I think when you look at the bracket, you'd say, oh, okay, Furman might be easier than Virginia, and you might be right. But if they're playing that well enough to beat Virginia and make it that far, I think you'd have to have a lot of concern with how they're playing. So I think a lot of it. You mentioned Missouri, that's 7 seed. I think they were in the semifinals of the SEC championship. They're playing really well. Utah State is always a scary team to me. And then mentioned that San Diego State Charleston matchup. There's 2 teams. San Diego State has one player that averages double figures, but then you go down the list and it's like a bunch of 9, 8
Yeah.
with like 12 guys. So it's an interesting tournament this year. I think I've watched way too many conference championship games or tournament games last week and probably completely overthinking it. But there's so many teams that you can kind of see that have pieces uh, to maybe make a run to kind of spoil some other ones. And it may just end up being chalk when it's all said and done. Maybe just really good games. But I think if you're West Virginia, pretty much from the outset, it's got to fight. It's going to be a fight all the way. All the way. If you're going to go, it's going to be a fight every single night.
It is, and I mean, in years past, like I would look at the bracket and I'd be like, man, yeah, I think this is definitely a path to a Sweet 16. Maybe they could get to the Elite Eight. Like 2021, I really felt strong about that bracket. I can't remember how far I had them going. I'd have to go back and look, but I definitely had them getting past Syracuse. I had them in the Sweet 16. I maybe put them in the Elite Eight because I think I had some weird upset there that allowed them to get to the Elite Eight, and I think that's where I had them lose. But we've talked about it a lot too. Is this thing's all about matchups? It's not always about you know being a 3 seed or a 4 seed in some cases. Like it's you could be a 3 seed and get a really good mid-major, low-major team that's a 14 that's really good offensively, and if they get hot, you're done for. So it's about matchups, and for me, when I looked at this bracket, I'm just like, man, this is this is tough. Like, I don't know that if you're Bob Huggins, you're really sitting here smiling, thinking, oh, all right, now we're at a Big 12 play, we can kind of play our brand of ball now, and we can just kind of cruise through a weekend. I don't know that that's going to happen at all. Like, I mean, I really think there's a good chance they could lose this first round game against Maryland. And if they don't, I don't see how they get past Alabama. I don't. But that's just me. When you look at the matchups or the matchup with Maryland and kind of the path that it would take for West Virginia to get beyond this first weekend and into the second weekend. I mean, what was your first thoughts? Was it like there ain't no way in hell that they're getting to the Sweet 16, or is there like, if they play well, they could?
Oh yeah, there's definitely West Virginia can move on to the Sweet 16 without a doubt
Think
because yeah, you look how they played at Kansas defensively, and they were hitting tough shots. Absolutely, they can
I mean,
definitely do
Bama's
it.
just still power.
Alabama's had their moments this season,
Yeah,
for sure, where they've had lapses, and they may look at West Virginia at 19 and 14 and think, okay, we can just show up. So yeah, we've said that about West Virginia. How many times did they think they could just show up? It
yeah.
happens everywhere. It's not just a West Virginia thing. Especially with two teams that, when you look at West Virginia Maryland matchup, are going to pride themselves on defense. That game might be 52-50 when it's all said and done. Alabama may score 100 their first game and feel overconfident. So yeah, West Virginia even may get Alabama's best. You got Keedy, that's Brandon Miller, one of their best players, is a freshman. Talk about experience in it in the tournament. So I definitely give West Virginia a shot. I'm not saying West Virginia's. I'm not. I don't know if I'm going to go as bold as saying West Virginia's going to the Sweet 16 because, like you said, they may end up losing to Maryland. That's not an easy matchup for anybody. Maryland's going to be a tough out for anybody in this tournament as well. So, yeah, I can definitely see it happening. Alabama's gotten nights off, and they're going to have to come ready to play on a day's rest, to either play Maryland or West Virginia, and two teams that are going to be physical and play really strong defense. So Alabama's, Alabama may look at their bracket right now and think they have an easy path, and they would be mistaken if they underestimated that second round matchup.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I mean, it's just the offensive explosion that they can unleash on any given night, especially Brandon Miller. Um, just a super talented kid that's going to make himself a lot of money this summer. But anyways, we'll dive more into this.
And the thing you got to remember too, I mean, we just got out of the Big 12, but they're not going to see anything from Alabama that they haven't seen this year, so they're not going to catch them off guard
Right.
at all. So, and you got to think that West Virginia is going to be more with a chip on their shoulder, geared up to knock off one of the better teams in the country. And when they get that kind of feeling themselves and kind of get that swagger, and they're going to go knock somebody off. They've been tough to beat this year.
So let's take a little bit deeper look here at Maryland. 55 or 56% of the fans on ESPN are picking Maryland to win this matchup. I believe it said 11 of the last 16 matchups between 8 and 9 seeds. The 9 seed is actually won. Take that for what it's worth. I mean, it's basically two even teams going at it every time that you get that matchup. But just looking at Maryland's resume here, they obviously get off to a hot 8-0 start, which includes a win over Miami, which is a team that's really heated up here of late. Illinois, they won over. You scroll down, they actually beat Purdue. Well, they ended up splitting with Purdue, but they did beat them by 14 pretty decisively. They beat Northwestern, which is a tournament team. But the way they ended the year, though, two pretty, I wouldn't say two bad losses. I guess Penn State's not a bad loss because they're in the tournament. Ohio State, not really a good team. I think they finished the year under 500. So finished the regular season 0-2 in their last two. They go to the Big Ten tournament, beat Minnesota before falling to Indiana. I believe that was in the quarterfinals. So lost three of their last four. West Virginia, obviously, we know their situation. They win their last two and then go 1-1 in the Big 12 tournament. When you look at this Maryland resume, I mean, obviously, the strength of schedule is nowhere near, in my opinion, what West Virginia's is. But I mean, what jumps out to you when you look at this schedule?
I mean, they played a lot of good teams in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten kind of gets overlooked for their physicality. To be honest, I mean, you look at Purdue, they kind of lead the way, and how West Virginia played against them, and you see Maryland beat them, and that was actually the lowest output Purdue had all season. So they held on the better teams in the country to the lowest output. So it's a strong resume in my opinion. They're familiar with the Big Ten. Played a lot of teams twice, and you mentioned the end. You kind of look at that at Penn State. Penn State needed that win to help their tournament resume. Penn State's solid team. Kind of mentioned them how they represented themselves in the tournament conference all the way to championship to Purdue, and almost came away with a win in that. So Penn State was playing really well. They had to play them on the road. Maryland didn't really have as much to play for, so you kind of put in that little factor. So I don't really worry about it. Indiana's a great team. I think they knocked off Purdue twice this season as well. Maryland protected home court. I know I saw Lenardi's pick was West Virginia.
Really?
And it was funny to me because when he did it separately, he talked about West Virginia. And when he talked about Maryland, he said Maryland hasn't played well away from home. Watch out for West Virginia's toughness. And I was like, oh, okay. West Virginia hasn't played that well away from home. Although
There they have it.
towards the end of the season, I mentioned the Kansas game at the end of the year, towards the end of the year where they played well at the Fog, but uh, I thought that was interesting. They didn't play well on the road either. But I thought they played, you kind of look at the scores, they played tough on the road. There wasn't really much blowout. So it's a tough schedule. First year for Kevin Willard. I think he has his guys, he set program record defensively for the lowest scoring average allowed. So I think it's a great resume. Not a bad resume. I think Big Ten gets. I know we're in the Big 12, and hey, West Virginia is in the best league, but Big Ten's not far behind. They always put out, especially at the top. Kevin Willard's a good coach. I think it's a good resume, and like I said, this isn't a team that people should be overlooking because the last three out of the four just kind of take it into some context there.
Yeah. So let's look
And
at.
actually, if you look what Ohio State did in the Big 12 and the Big 10 tournament, they also got hot towards the end of the season.
Yes, they
That
did.
was also on the road. So I didn't look to see if that was Ohio State's senior night, but it'd be interesting to see if that may have played into factor as well.
So here's the numbers for Maryland on the year. You can see Jameer Young, their leading scorer at 16 a game. They've got four guys that average double-digit scoring, so they can really kind of spread the floor, do a lot of different things. What should West Virginia be? I guess be on the lookout here for. I mean, is there any one clear guy? I mean, obviously Jameer Young's leading the team in scoring, but is he kind of what they go to? I mean, I know we're still kind of just opening the book on them too, but I mean, just from your early gatherings of it.
Yeah, I mean he's been the guy. I don't think they really don't overwhelm you offensively. I know I've kind of just been it's all been defensively how they've handled the season, but yeah, he's the go-to guy. You got two guys underneath, two big guys, 6'8", 6'10". Um, that's going to pound the boards and work well underneath. So this is, Willard was in the Big East. So if you think Big East basketball, who was it there that was was he the I can't remember the coach who was there. He was more offensive geared. So yeah, if you kind of look at this team, I'm trying to think of a team to compare, because I mean, you kind of look at it like, okay, they could kind of fit in the Big 12 in this sense, because they're just they're well coached defensively, and they're going to get out and transition and try to get some points uh, through the defense as well. So I I want to say Oklahoma State, but that's not right. There's been so many different looks. Huh?
Maybe like a K-State Bruce Weber team.
Uh, no, I'd say they're probably a little better offensively. They just haven't had the shooting
Yeah.
nights. They're just not a very good shooting team. I would say is probably their biggest downfall.
Yes, I mean, they've like I said, they've got a bunch of guys that can really score the ball. Jameer Young, which we've already highlighted. I mean, he's capable of going for 30 on just about any night. I think there was a couple of games where he actually did go for 30 plus. Several games with 20 or 25. So for West Virginia, I mean, it sounds cliche as hell, right? But I mean, if they don't make shots, it's going to be hard for them to win. And I think I mean, you can say that for just about any tournament team, but for this team in particular, like their defense doesn't typically travel well. It doesn't always play to the level that it's capable of. And if that defense doesn't go to Birmingham with them, they might get beat up pretty badly. So, I mean, Eric Stevenson has to be a factor, obviously. But they have to have other guys be a factor. Emmett Matthews, especially, I think, is going to be very key in this matchup. Like, if he can stretch the floor, open things up I mean, we've said it a million times. Jimmy Bell's got to get going offensively, but he's just been so fatigued, the long season, taking a beating. But this is going to be a tough matchup for him underneath. So they need to really be able to spread the floor, get him some open looks, get some shots on the rim. I guess just what's your main key in this one for West Virginia?
They're gonna have to run their offense and take care of the basketball. Just continue to attack the basket, get the line, try to get some of those guys in foul trouble. Maryland hasn't really done, I would say, a great job of getting to the line, but they've been pretty decent. Probably look at Dante Scott, or not Dante Scott. Was it? Yeah, Dante Scott. Or no, Julian. Shoot, Julian Reese is probably going to attack, get to the line. So these guys are going to attack to the rim. So they're going to have to. It's good. I can't emphasize enough. This is going to be a rock fight. So both ends of the floor, you're going to have to be efficient. You're going to have to make them score over top of you. Don't no stupid fouls. Don't reach. Don't get yourself in foul trouble. And so much of that is going to be how they're officiating the game. I think throughout, especially after that first part of the Big 12, they really adapted to the officiating. If you look, even some of the touch fouls where you're like, oh man, come on. They just kind of ignored it and kept playing. They just got accustomed to it. You can control what you can control. So I think they have to keep that mindset. If they are calling touch fouls, you can just stop reaching, stay in front, make them take tough shots, because it might be an issue, a key thing to kind of get the offense flowing, call some early fouls so they can you just got to adjust. Don't continue to send them to the foul line. I think that's really what it is defensively. Stay on your guy. Maybe they can get the trap working in there. This is a senior led team in the backcourt. So see if that works out. And then again, offensively, stay efficient. Don't force anything. Don't try to play. I don't like to call it hero ball, because it's not guys trying to take it upon themselves. It's just guys trying to make plays. And I felt they got away from that towards the end of the year. So if things start to falter offensively, remain patient, continue to run the offense. Do not play isolation, because that is not their best offense.
Yeah. That's sitting there, dribble the ball between your legs 30 times and just no movement, get to the shot clock with like 5 seconds left, and you're forcing up a low percentage shot. It's a tough thing to watch.
I will note Joe Toussaint has played against Maryland 5 times.
Yes. Good point.
5 times. And
his record?
Well, I don't know his record, but I have his stats. What I thought was it's a new coach. So, but he's averaging 3 steals against Maryland. Highlight. As a sophomore, he had 6 against them. He's also averaging 4.8 assists to 2.2 turnovers. So that was his freshman, sophomore, junior years, and I would say Joe Toussaint is a much better player as a senior, although this is a completely different team. So he only averaged 6 points, never went double figures, but he also wasn't relied to score on, as we all know, coming into the season at Iowa. But defensively, Joe Toussaint played really well in most of those games. I think 3 of them. Yep, 3 of them were on the road, and he actually played better against Maryland when he was at College Park. So Toussaint and Maryland on the road go together.
I like it. I like the little hidden nugget there. So that's going to do it for us today. We're actually going to be back tomorrow. We're going to make our bracket predictions and see how that shakes out. We'll show you how far we got West Virginia going, who's in our Final Four, who's going to win the national championship, all that good stuff. And obviously, you'll know where we have West Virginia ending their year, but we'll also make our score predictions or at least our game predictions for the Maryland game. And then Thursday, Mountaineers Now post-game show will recap the first-round matchup between West Virginia and Maryland. The tip-off is 12:15, I believe, on CBS. So stick around. We've got a lot of stuff up on the site at Mountaineers Now. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Mountaineers Now for all the good West Virginia tournament stuff surrounding this game and beyond. Hit us up on our site and check everything out that we got going on there. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.